So let's press record. Do I press record, Heather, or you do that? I do that.
We are ready to go. I got it.
Okay, great. Okay, we're recording. Hooray. Okay, well, welcome everybody to this MiALA Web UX interest group webinar. So we're really happy to welcome our speakers today from Grand Valley. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of them. Sorry, somebody just came to the door and I had to say, no, don't come in. So we're introducing today Kristen Meyer. She's the UX librarian at GVSU and a certified customer experience professional. She's worked in libraries for 18 years and is passionate about design thinking, creating user-centered library spaces and services, and training and development. We're also welcoming Heather Allen, is a student supervisor for the GVSU Libraries UX team and a former GVSU Libraries student colleague. Heather has her Master's of Education in Adult and Higher Education from GVSU. Next is Katie Alfinar, is a library specialist on GVSU Libraries UX team. She conducts, analyzes, and reports on user research, implements user engagement initiatives, and mentors student employees. Katie is a Master of Library and Information Sciences student at Wayne State University and a member of MiALA's Communications and Marketing Committee. We're also welcoming Raya Green, is a lead UX student colleague at GVSU Libraries. She is a dance/nonprofit administration major and has an anticipated graduation date of April 2021. So today, the four of them are going to be speaking about the value of involving student colleagues in library UX work. And so this is actually the third in a series of webinars that the MiALA Web UX team has hosted this year. And so our next one is in March, and it's going to be about Google Data Studio. And we'll be welcoming Brian Holda from Davenport University and Kat King from the University of Michigan, who are going to talk about two different uses of Google Data Studio. So I'll at the end of the webinar, I'll kind of shout out the date for that and registration. Well, what I was going to say. I think with that, we're ready to go. So Kristen and Heather and Katie and Raya, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you so much, Denise. And hi everyone, we're so excited to facilitate this webinar for you on behalf of the Web UX Interest Group. We wanted to mention that we definitely will have time at the end for some discussion questions and for you to ask us any questions you might have, but feel free to use the chat feature and ask us questions at any time. We might be able to answer some of them right away, and if not, we'll have a running list of them to work through at the end of the session. So this webinar is focused on the topic of the value of involving student colleagues in library user experience efforts. And we hope that today's session will inspire you to think about how you might want to involve student colleagues in UX work at your own institution. So we know that some of you who are listening might already be doing this to some extent. And so while we're going to share what we're doing at Grand Valley with you, today's session will be much richer for everybody if you'll participate by sharing through chat what you've done or what you've learned that relates to this topic. To give you a sense of the flow of today's webinar, we'll start by giving you some context about GVSU's user experience team. Then we'll summarize the benefits that we've experienced by involving student colleagues in our UX work. And then next, which is definitely my favorite part of our content today, we'll each share a specific story that reflects these benefits. And then we'll talk about some things that you might want to consider if you're thinking about some new ways to involve student colleagues in your UX work. And then again, at the end, we've got some discussion questions for you that we hope you'll participate in. And of course, we'll have time to answer any questions you might have for us. But before we go any farther today, we want to take time to introduce ourselves. Denise did a great job of reading our bios, but we want to make sure you have a chance to hear all of our voices. So again, we're all from Grand Valley and we're all members of our library's user experience team, which we're going to talk about more in just a minute. So I'm Kristen Meyer. I'm our user experience librarian and area lead for strategic planning. And I'm actually the only one of us who has never been a student employee at GVSU Libraries.
Hi, I'm Katie Elfinar, library specialist.
Hi, I'm Raya Green, a lead UX student worker.
And I'm Heather Allen, library specialist and user experience student supervisor.
I know that now you all have our voices memorized, but we know that sometimes it's kind of hard in a webinar to keep track of who's speaking, so we've also tried to include that information on each slide. Since this webinar is focused on involving student colleagues in UX work, we want to make sure that there's a shared understanding of what we mean when we say UX work. So we define UX work as any intentional effort to improve library spaces and services, and that includes both physical and digital spaces and services. So UX work might include collecting and reviewing data, implementing various UX techniques, implementing design thinking or service design techniques. Pretty much we're talking about anything that you're intentionally doing to anticipate, understand, or respond to user needs in any area of your library. I also want to mention that at Grand Valley, our use of the word student colleague is really intentional. We view student employment as an extension of learning outside the classroom, and we view our student employees as true colleagues. This nuanced language is something that our Dean Annie Belanger, brought to Grand Valley, and most of us really started using it right away. It's something that really resonated with us because it's really how we think about student employment related work. So again, while the purpose of this webinar is really to help you think about how you might want to involve student colleagues in UX work at your own library, we want to share what we've learned from involving student colleagues in UX work at Grand Valley. And to do that, it might be helpful for you just to have an overview of our UX team. So as our UX librarian, I lead our UX team, which includes 5 staff across 3 library locations. And our team is embedded in the library's Operations and User Services Department, which traditionally would be known as Access Services. Our team also formally includes the 25 or so student colleagues that take the lead at the single service desk at the Marietta Pew Library. So while the primary function of our UX students is to provide frontline customer service in our service desk environment, and you can see a picture of Raya and another one of our student colleagues, Sarah, at the service desk there. So they spend most of their time answering questions in that environment, answering directional, circulation, technology, and basic reference questions. But they also understand that their role is more than simply providing a quality transaction at the desk. Of course, we care about providing high quality transactions. That certainly impacts the way that some people experience the library. But we see the role of our UX students as much larger than that. Their roles include helping us improve all of the ways that students experience our libraries. And they do this by providing input and feedback on all kinds of initiatives, by helping us collect data that we review to make user-centered improvements. They do this by being observant and paying attention to where their fellow students get confused or stuck. They help us discover what misconceptions and frustrations student users might have. Our UX students also help open the library. They help close the library, and they roam the library every hour, looking for people to help at the point of need, ensuring that everything looks okay from an operational perspective, and helping us collect various types of data. This really means that they're in a position to be the eyes and ears of the library. And because they're also students, they're uniquely positioned to help us identify pain points and how student users experience our spaces and services. Additionally, our UX students help us design user engagement activities. So those are the activities that we offer during times like Welcome Week and midterms, during exams. Those activities are all designed to help make students feel welcomed in the library, and they really help support whole student success. And so we think user engagement activities really do impact the way that students experience our libraries, and involving our students in that in designing those activities has been really helpful. They really help us think about what students are feeling during the rhythm of the academic year, and they help us figure out what activities might sort of align with students' interest and really resonate with them. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context about our model and what our UX students help us do. But we know that this model is really unique and that your institutional context might be really different from ours. So you might be a standalone UX librarian, you might be a web services librarian, you might be a member of a cross-departmental UX team. Maybe you're able to employ your own students, or maybe you'll need to partner with the student supervisors of other existing groups of student colleagues in your library if you want to get student colleagues more involved in this kind of work. Really, the biggest takeaway that we hope you have today is that however you're structured, there are benefits to involving student colleagues in UX work. And this is definitely a trend that we're seeing in other libraries too. So for example, many of you might be familiar with Rebecca Blakeston's work at the University of Arizona. They have a team of UX students, and their team is structured very differently than the way our team is structured at Grand Valley. So I recommend following her on Twitter if you'd like to get a sense of the amazing work that her student colleagues are doing there. I also attended UX Libs last summer, and several of the presenters at that conference talked about the ways in which they've involved other students in UX work. And the 2019 yearbook was just published. It's hot off the presses. In fact, I just received my copy in the mail this week, and you can see a picture of me excitedly tearing it out of its package in my kitchen there. And I highly recommend that if you're interested in reading the write-ups of many of those presentations. And now I'm going to pause and take a drink of water and turn it over to Katie, who's going to talk in more detail about some of the benefits that we have seen of involving student colleagues in our work at Grand Valley.
Thanks, Kristen. So we want to talk about some of the benefits of having student colleagues involved in UX work. And I'll discuss the benefits to the library, and then later Raya is going to talk about the benefits for students. This is going to be more of a general overview of benefits first, and then later we're going to cover some more specific examples. Our student colleagues are a feedback mechanism that is embedded directly into our service model. This leads to more student-centered library spaces and services. Student colleagues are both knowledgeable and trained in library resources. They're also one of the primary users of our libraries. This delightful combination enables student colleagues to view the library from a unique and valuable vantage point. Their experience as library users and their connections to peer library users or potential library users gives them valuable insight to what works well and how our libraries can grow. Involving student colleagues in UX work allows us to gain valuable perspectives that we would not likely obtain through other methods. Additionally, involving student colleagues in UX work elevates their role from transaction-based to interaction-based. Their collaboration on UX work helps our student colleagues see that their role is more than just providing a quality transaction at the service desk. They're more likely to proactively look for ways to help improve the library and improve how students experience all library spaces and services. Being a part of UX work increases student colleagues' stake in the library and their understanding of the library's mission and goals. This personal investment has ongoing benefits for the library because student colleagues will feel that their perspective and thoughts are valued, which encourages them to continue to share ideas for library improvement. When student colleagues are involved in helping us conduct user research, they can be more approachable than librarians or staff. A student colleague taking the lead on user research or collaborating with staff to gather data can break down the barriers and encourage student participation. I know all of you know that academic libraries are all about supporting student learning. And I know it's been suggested in library literature that student employment can be viewed similarly as other high-impact educational experiences. When we involve student colleagues in UX work, we're able to tell a new story to the campus community about how our library impacts student learning. If you want to learn more, I highly recommend checking out the article we have referenced here on the screen. There'll be a full citation at the end of the presentation in case you're interested. So these are some of the benefits that we've seen for the library, and now Raya is going to talk about the benefits for students that she's experienced.
Great, thank you, Katie. So yeah, those are some of the good examples of how UX work benefits the library, but I'll be covering how UX work is beneficial to us as the UX students. I've been a UX student at Grand Valley for about a year and a half now, and I've been able to learn a lot through my job that I think will transition to my future career in nonprofit work. This can be seen in the enhancement of my communication skills, being trained on a variety of topics, taking part in making student-centered improvements to the library, and access to multiple leadership opportunities. We are constantly given opportunities for advancement in our work as user experience students. In UX student employment, offering areas of advancement is beneficial for both us as students and to the staff we are supporting. Specifically, in our organizational chart, students can apply to be lead students, which puts more responsibility on us as both role models and in their physical work. Lead students take on more responsibilities and do self-initiated projects that benefit other student workers and the department as a whole. Beyond this, the staff often will come to students with a project they know they will have a vested interest in, so they are able to step outside their daily work duties to explore new opportunities. The utilization of students in UX work gives way for advancement opportunities that benefit the student in their professional career and uplift the rest of the staff. These opportunities for advancement can often directly tie into our next benefit, which is how our job and user experience is preparing us for our future. UX work allows students to build their resumes and be given opportunities that will benefit them in future professional settings. As UX students, we receive ongoing training, which includes participating in multiple workshops each semester. As a lead UX student, I get the benefit of both attending some of the workshops and being able to help lead some of these workshops. Training workshops are one way students are given the chance to learn applicable skills for their future. While some workshops are specifically tailored to our work on the job, other workshops are applicable outside of UX library work but still align with our values and what we want student workers to practice. Some examples of these types of workshops were on microaggression and inclusion in the workplace. We are also given the chance to be mentored by senior staff members in the Student Learning Plan program. This program was started at our library as a way to proactively help students match their work at the service desk to what they will be doing in their future careers. Students are paired up with one of 3 staff members involved in the program, and will set up recurring meetings with them to make these connections and work on their goals. The final aspect is that this job gives UX workers universal skills that can be transferable to any job we may have in the future, and it sets a good example of a professional work environment we may find ourselves in post-graduation. So another aspect of using students in UX work is their impact when new initiatives are being rolled out. It is common practice for students to be asked their input on upcoming projects that relate to user experience due to the fact that when we aren't on the clock, we are the users. We are able to bring in the perspective of students that will directly benefit from these initiatives. As UX workers, we also get the chance to collect the data on these projects to see if they are being used, if they are effective, and if there are any areas for improvement. This benefits student workers by adding yet another skill that can be utilized in our future careers, and it allows us to see a lasting impact of our work at the library. So we gave you a bit of an overview on what the benefits can be from involving UX student workers, but we want to give you more concrete and specific examples, so we are going to transition into hearing some of our favorite personal reflections and stories of the benefits that we've seen from involving student colleagues in UX work. And Heather is going to start us off.
Thanks, Raya. So Raya explained quite a bit about our lead UX student colleagues and their role at the library, but I wanted to add that these students apply and they earn their positions. They have to meet certain criteria prior to applying, and they have to have a positive history of representing the library in order to be considered. Like Ryan mentioned earlier, this is an opportunity for these students to be in a leadership role among their peers and have valuable work experiences at the same time. So the story that I wanted to share with you today is actually about a project that a lead UX student worked on last year, which I think is a good example of how this can be a mutually beneficial relationship for both the student and the library. So one key responsibility of lead UX students is to work on a UX related project throughout the year. This project must have an end goal of positively impacting the experience of library users. So normally, most students will make a proposal or prototype some type of program or solution or idea. Then they'll move the project forward by either actively putting the project into action or by outlining next steps if it can't be completed at that time. The student colleague that I'd like to talk about today, he was always very interested in UX work, and he regularly brought forward observations, feedback, and ideas for improving our services and spaces for users. He's a very innovative, forward-thinking person and has since carried this spirit into his professional work. In fact, this student was a business major at GVSU, and he never had any plans to work in libraries before school or after. However, his experience working at a library was still very much translatable into a business setting. We later found out that he talked about his experience with this project and the Lead UX student program highly in his professional interviews for internships and full-time jobs. So this student was actually attending an art festival in fall 2018 and was inspired by a system that he saw an artist using to gather feedback from guests. So he took that idea and decided to use it to prototype a system that we could use for either gathering user feedback or allowing users to interact with us at the library. Essentially, library users were tasked with responding to a particular question. In this case, the question was, when you come to the library, what type of study do you typically engage in? In our particular library, we have both collaborative and quiet study spaces, so the answer choices were either collaboratively or quietly. Users were supposed to take a little colored stone out of the container that best matched their response and put the stone in a central container. This central container represented the collective thoughts of all of those who voted. The prototype was so successful that we actually then put the project into action the following week and gathered responses to a few other questions that we were curious about. I've included an example of the finished product on the slide if you'd like to see. The questions we were asking here was, how long will you be at the library today? And the container in the back right includes the collective thoughts of all the library users who voted. The student in this story took an observation and saw it through to develop a very successful project. It was so great to see him so excited about his work. In fact, he chose to come into the library multiple times a day on his own to check the progress and see if things needed to be emptied or refilled. And I wanted to share this story because it goes to show that students have such great ideas. They're eager to be involved and have additional responsibilities, and they're excited to have resume building work experiences. So next up, Kristen's going to share her personal reflection with you all.
Thanks, Heather. I love that story. So one of my favorite stories about involving a student colleague in UX work actually involves Katie. So Katie was a UX student before she graduated and eventually became a full-time staff member for us. After the Marietta Pew Library opened in 2013, we did a lot of post-occupancy assessment. We wanted to learn how students were using the library, what we got right, and what we might need to change about our building design in the future. So one of the UX techniques that we implemented in 2014 were touchpoint tours. And so in touchpoint tours, we asked random student users to give us a tour of the library, and they would point out spaces and services just like they would do if they were giving a tour to their friends or families. This helped us identify what students knew about, what they didn't know about, how they described specific spaces and services, what was intuitive and what wasn't intuitive about the building. So as a UX student, Katie helped me conduct this technique, and her collaboration was so valuable. Because she was a peer, I think students were more likely to want to participate and they felt more comfortable participating. And after doing each tour, Katie and I would chat about our notes and document any insights we had. And Katie had several insights that wouldn't have occurred to me. She was really a true collaborator in the whole process. Later, Katie mentioned to me that this was one of the projects that really sparked her interest in UX work. And I'm really glad it did because she's been an amazing part of our UX team ever since. So this is one of many examples that I've experienced that really demonstrates that symbiotic nature of involving students in UX work. So Katie's involvement improved the project, but it also contributed to her learning and development outside the classroom.
Thanks, Kristen. As Kristen discussed, my experiences as a UX student colleague, especially collaborating on UX work like the Touchpoint tours, have a huge impact on my career. I've always been an avid library user, but it wasn't until I was given the opportunity to delve into UX work that I began to see how my career plans fit very well into the library field. Conducting Touchpoint tours with Kristen and many other aspects of my work as a UX student gave me a better understanding of what opportunities exist in libraries, and I discovered how many of my strengths, interests, and what I was learning in classes could really translate into a career. After graduating from Grand Valley, I began pursuing a career in libraries. I'm currently getting my master's in library science and once again working with the UX team at GVSU Libraries, and now as a staff member. This journey has given me a deep understanding of the value of involving student colleagues in UX work. And one of my favorite parts of my job is that I have daily opportunities to collaborate with our student colleagues, from serendipitous feedback to extended collaboration on projects. One of the times that I got to collaborate on an extended project was when I was working closely with many of our UX student colleagues to develop an open seating service. During exam cram, the week before and the week of final exams, GVSU's MiALA Library has a substantial increase of users looking for a place to work on all those final projects, lengthy papers, and somewhere to spend hours studying for finals. Needs can vary from individuals looking for complete silence to groups looking for tables to work at quietly together, or groups looking for a place to collaborate. We already had a few services in place to regularly assist users in finding places to study, and these services met user needs for the majority of the year. However, during peak times like exam cram, library staff and student colleagues regularly received requests for assistance finding spots to sit or just general feedback about the difficulty of finding a place to study in the library. So we wanted to explore a better way to direct users to open seating during these busy times. We tested a Text the Library for Open Seating initiative, but determined we didn't have enough consistent or current information to provide specific recommendations for users. Staff answering the texts had to check in with a student colleague who roamed the building last to ask if they'd noticed any open spots. Some difficulties with this method included student colleagues were often busy answering questions at the service desk, which increased the wait time for the text inquiry, and it relied heavily on the student colleague remembering very specific open seats, especially when they were already collecting a lot of other data, like head counts. I collaborated directly with our UX student colleagues through the entire process of prototyping a method to track open seating. Some of the big challenges were creating something that would provide enough information for staff and student colleagues to provide helpful seating recommendations at the service desk, while not burdening the UX student roaming the building with extensive work. When they roam during exam cram, the UX students are gathering head counts, filling out a space usage form, looking for users who may need help, and watching out for the safety and accessibility issues that are inevitable during exam cram. It's a lot to juggle. Our initial prototype was a binder of laminated floor plans of the building that the roaming student could mark open seats on with a dry erase marker. While simple in concept, prototyping and open input from our student colleagues revealed that the binders were really difficult to handle, along with the iPad they used for collecting other data and the clicker for head counts. Additionally, the floor plans were unreliable because furniture moves so much during exam cram, and it took most of the students a substantial amount of time to fill out. Overall, there was a lot of room for improvement. But the UX students heard the complaints about a packed building from their peers, and they saw the benefit of being able to provide recommendations to them. So, despite the problems, they wanted to find ways to improve it. They contributed a multitude of suggestions and very specific ways that the system could be more efficient and useful. After multiple iterations, the prototype eventually morphed into the Google Sheet that you'll see on the slide. This chart was based off of a reasonably successful prototype that was a laminated chart dividing the library into sections based on the noise level and seating type. By digitizing the chart, we were able to get more real-time updates from the student roaming and then have the sheet open on the service desk computer so we could provide update recommendations even when the student is out on the roam. We determined that it wasn't beneficial to indicate which specific seats were open because the exact location of chairs was difficult to describe to users and they could already be taken. Instead, the UX student could estimate if there was more or less 5 open seats in a specific area. When there was more than 5 open seats, it was reasonable to assume that within the next hour, there would be some open seating in that area. This estimation method allowed students to make a quick snap judgment of an area on their roam, and the staff member and student colleagues could provide a good recommendation at the service desk. The final piece that helped the open seating system come together was compiled by a variety of feedback from student colleagues. Some commented that it was difficult to effectively do all of the regular roaming duties on top of the open seating form, and it was really frustrating to fill out the form when the library ended up being fairly empty. So we divided it up. We had the students do one roam at quarter after where they did all of their regular roaming duties, collecting the usual head counts and other data. And when they returned, if there was over 600 people in the building, another UX student would do a roam and just fill out the open seating chart. This enabled us to determine if the building was busy enough to need the information before sending a UX student to collect it, and it allowed the students to break up the tasks. This was only through multiple prototypes and open communication with student colleagues that we were able to create a sustainable system that gathered enough information to provide quality recommendations, but also allowed the students roaming the building to perform their other duties. Texting the library for seating recommendations has been a really popular service. We even collaborate with other buildings on campus now. They reserve extra spaces during exam cram, and it gives us some other places to recommend when the library is particularly full. We often receive multiple texts from the same students throughout the week looking for another spot to study, which tells us that these recommendations are helpful and the system is working. Well, that was a pretty long story. Can you tell that I really like working with our student colleagues on this type of UX work? I'll turn it over to Raya now so she can share some of her personal reflections.
We do enjoy working with you too, Katie.
Thanks, Raya.
So my work as a user experience student at the MiALA Web library has been a great benefit in preparing me for my future and in building my resume. A lot of my work here all stems from inspiration that I got due to another lead student colleague from a training workshop that she led a few years ago. And fun fact, this student has since graduated and is now actually getting her master's in library sciences, which is very exciting. So the workshop was on the mission, vision, and values of the university libraries, which helped inform how I wrote my cover letters when applying to internships. I've been able to take these ideals and apply them to my academic work and during the summer internship I secured using this knowledge. Seeing a fellow student develop and run one of our training workshops was a huge influence for me to apply to be a lead student and then use my own project to run a workshop myself. At this point, I have developed and run 2 different training workshops. One of them was on how to specialize tours of the library, and the other was a joint venture with a fellow lead student on advanced circulation procedures. These 2 training workshops are obviously specifically tuned to our work here at the MiALA Web library, But training your UX students can be widely beneficial for any UX student context, since having highly trained students directly impacts their user experience work. But going forward with my reflection, these opportunities have provided me with experience on training employees, and it gave me more context on the importance of continued training. The LEAD projects as a whole taught me the process of proposing, planning, preparing, and implementing an initiative, which will be critical for me going into the workforce. My most recent work as a UX student is the work I've been doing on this webinar. When I was approached about participating, I was excited at the prospect to yet again add something to my resume and learn a new skill that could aid me in my future. Something that drove me to apply to this job was the buzz around working at the library. It had such a reputation of being the best job on campus, and I found this to be true in more ways than I could have expected or imagined. Doing my daily UX work and having the added responsibility in my lead work have surpassed what I expected the impact of any on-campus job to have. I assumed coming into college that any job I got during college would just be another way to make money and just something to get me by. But that I have found completely not to be true here at my work at the library. The way that our system uses students in user experience work is so beneficial for us going forward into our careers, and is really paving the way for what implementing student work on college campuses can look like. I'm very thankful for the various ways my job as a user experience student has prepared me for my future and given me work opportunities I couldn't get anywhere else on campus.
Thanks so much, Raya. And we're so glad to have you as one of our lead UX students too. So we have one more story to share. Many of you might know our colleague, Matthew Reedsma, who's the Web Services Librarian at Grand Valley. Matt's really well known in the library UX community for all of his web-related UX work. And he's also found numerous ways to involve student colleagues in his work at Grand Valley. He shared a couple of stories with me as we were talking about today's content, but I don't think I could tell most of them as well as Matt can. But I did want to really share an important tip from him. So, although there are lots of ways that you can involve student colleagues in UX work, keep in mind that working at the library has probably provided many of them with a greater awareness of library resources than kind of regular student users would have. And just like library staff, over time, students learn all kinds of insider information from their time working in the library. So if you're doing something like running website usability tests, for example, student colleagues who are trained on how to search the library website probably wouldn't be useful as participants. Of course, you could involve them in actually planning the usability tests, just don't use them as participants. While our student colleagues have unique perspectives that are incredibly important in helping us make many UX improvements, remember to keep in mind the limitations of their perspectives.
That's right, Kristen. So as we're nearing the end of the webinar today, I'd like to share some tips or recommendations that could help you be successful involving students in UX work at your library, especially if you want to collaborate with existing groups of student colleagues that are outside of your own team. So if this isn't something that you're already doing, the first thing that we'd recommend is making sure that you have buy-in from people who directly supervise your student colleagues. This is important to make sure everyone is on board and willing to participate to make this successful. Katie and Raya talked about all of the benefits to both students and the library, so you might want to share those. Find examples of how students have participated in UX work at other libraries, and I definitely welcome you to use some of the examples that we've shared today. You might also want to highlight some examples or ideas you have for involving students in your own library. And we recognize that not all libraries are the same, but no matter your specific position or how your library is organized, we definitely think that there is a way to get students involved. For example, maybe you have student colleagues who shelf books for you, or maybe they work at a service desk environment or at a reference desk and help answer reference questions. Try to think of ways to utilize the students that you currently employ and share examples of things that they can be doing no matter what their job duties are. We also recommend that you think about and explain the time commitment and any budgetary considerations that might be involved with your ideas. So consider if there is any downtime that students can be working on a UX project during their scheduled hours. And if not, is there any room to offer additional hours to students interested in UX work? Think about how long will the project take to complete and consider the potential return on investment and if it's worth it. Once you have buy-in and everyone is on board and excited about getting students involved in your UX projects, make it a collaborative process. Work together with the stakeholders to develop the project scope and work out all the details. You'll want to share with the students as well what they'll be doing and what they could gain from this process. It's important that they know all of the benefits that you already know as well. So arguably, the most important part of this process is closing the loop at the end. After your first successful project, you'll definitely want to continue having students participate in UX work. So be sure to follow up with all parties involved. One of the ways that we do this at GVSU is by keeping a UX improvement log in Excel. I've included a sample list from fall of 2018 on the screen now. This log is a list of some of the improvements we made, including perceived impact this improvement had for us, what insight prompted the change, and the cost involved. We share this list each year with library leadership, library faculty and staff, student colleagues, and we even put certain items on our digital displays for all of our users to see as well. We even bring this list to our fall UX student orientation. So new UX students can see how their work in our department will impact the library experience of fellow GVSU students. Another way we ensure we're closing the loop is by collecting data through web software called LibInsight, which is part of SpringShare. UX students and staff who are working at the service desk record nearly all interactions between the service desk and library users. When we look at the data every semester and identify if we're seeing any trends, these trends inform what changes we might need to make or how we should move forward. Maybe we need to look at a library policy again, or purchase something new to meet a user need, or maybe make improvements to a procedure that we've been doing the same way. After looking at the data and any trends that we've identified, we'll write a semesterly report and are sure to share this report with the same folks that I described before. All that to be said, we acknowledge that all libraries and library structures are different and what we do might not work for you. But the most important thing we wanted to get across today with this webinar is that there are many benefits to utilizing student colleagues in your UX work, benefits that are both for them and for your library. So thank you all so much for participating today. We know that some of you are probably already involving student colleagues in your UX work, and we'd love to open this up to discussion. Please feel free to use the chat feature to respond to the prompts listed on the screen or to ask us any questions that you might have.
So we know that you can read them, but we're hoping that you'll answer how, the first question is, how do you already involve student colleagues in UX work at your institution? The second question is, how might you further involve student colleagues in UX work? And then the third question is, what existing student employee groups might help you improve library spaces and services? So we do have one response from Brian. Brian tests out usability tests with student workers. So Brian is saying that if he's crafting a new thing that he wants to study, he prototypes with the students first. Yeah, that's great, Brian, and probably is really in alignment with what Matthew says. So like you could prototype how you'll run the usability test, but then get student participants who are not student workers.
So I'm just gonna unmute and talk so I don't have to type a bunch. Oh, as Brian's typing too. So I'm curious, one way that we use student colleagues in US work is in my department at U of M. I work in the library environments department, and we work on a lot of in-person user experience stuff. But I'm hoping we can involve student colleagues who work at our service points. But I've also, I've heard about your model before, and I've always been curious about how you balance time spent at the desk and time roaming, and how like the budget model works for that. Because I think that we're often focused on getting enough hours to cover the desk, and that often seems like a stressful process. And so I'm just curious about how you balance like making sure you have coverage at the desk and then giving the ability for people to kind of roam and have these special projects. Like, how does that work?
Sure, great question. So basically, we typically schedule students based on peak times of day. So we typically have 3 student employees at the service desk during our peak times, and we know what those peak times are through our LibInsight data. And then we have 2 students typically at all other times. And it's really important for us having a single service point to include roaming as a regular part of our service, because this is a really big building. We don't have security here. So even just making sure that students are roaming so that they can look for a person who might need help at the point of need, to make sure, we have mobile furniture, which is really great for students being able to manage their own learning and modify the environment, but it does sometimes mean that furniture gets pushed in the fire lane or up against an important exit door. So it's really important for our service model for that roaming piece to happen. So by making sure that we have 3 students staffing the service desk during those peak times, one of them can always leave to roam, and then we have 2 other students behind to answer those questions at the desk. I think you had another part to your question. So another thing that we think is really important is, as you might have gotten from Katie's story, we really try to balance what we ask students to do on roams. So if we're collecting data about, for 2 weeks, if we want to learn how people are using our study rooms, we'll plan that out so that students aren't collecting data about that and 4 other things. So right now, actually, we're interested. We changed the way that we included some different furniture options in our exhibition space. And so we're looking at how people are using that furniture. So we're collecting data about the exhibition space. Then we're working with our student senate on these basically signs that encourage people to sit with others, like a kind of like a community restaurant style table. And so we're collecting data about how people are using those signs. So we're really strategic, and we have like a sheet that says okay, in this hour, you're just roaming, right? And we always collect data that populates our digital displays, the traffic maps on our digital displays. So students are always collecting that data. But if we're adding data like the exhibition space data or the sit with me signs, we make sure to space that out on different hours so that, we want students to be able to complete a roam in 20 minutes and get back to the desk. Did any of you have anything else to add about our approach to that?
You could also just add that we also have a staff member that is near the service desk environment. So if, but our student employees, our student colleagues, they actually are at the service desk. So we have a staff member that's supporting them from behind the scenes. So if students are off doing different things, we have someone that's always nearby that can help them. We have another question that came in. Brian asked, Are your students facilitating digital usability tests with other students? Are you able to answer that?
There have been some instances of that in the past. So for example, Matthew does a lot of our web usability and digital UX kind of work. And so he, for example, he worked with student colleagues to test some applications on our digital displays, and he has involved them in usability testing to some degree in the past. But yeah, so I think Brian is saying, yeah, Brian, so you're seeing like maybe you would get better results if you had more student colleagues facilitating the tests. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I think Matthew would be the best one at Grand Valley to weigh in on that.
Yep.
Denise, one of the things, back to your question too about making the case for having additional students staff the service desk. So we did have a couple of citations on our slides, and the full citations are in the back, but just kind of on the benefits of our peer-led service model in general. So that's something that we have a peer-led service model in our service desk environment, but also with in our knowledge market service, we have research consultants, writing consultants, speech and data consultants who are leading those peer services. And there's a lot in the literature about the benefits of peer-led library services. So for us, it's easy to sort of make the case that we need to have enough student colleagues at the desk to be able to, provide a great service, but also we can talk about the benefits to the students themselves. And I think, you heard from Raya today about all of the benefits that she's experienced in this role. So if you ever need to advocate for more funding, really talking about the benefits to those students, I think could be important.
We have another question from Denise. Could you tell us more about the mentoring with full-time staff program that you have? I can touch on that, and if Kristen wants to fill in with anything more, or Raya, as someone who's gone through the program. So our student learning plan program, basically when students first start with us, they'll fill out a form. It basically asks them, tell us a little bit of information about yourself. What are some of the goals that you have at Grand Valley or even at the library? What are some of the things that you want to do? What are some of the things that you're involved in? Where do you want to end up? And they'll do that. So the first time, like one of the first weeks that they're working with us, and then they'll do it again the second year. They'll fill out the same form. An amended form. It asks them some different questions after they've been working with us for a year. But the second piece after they fill out that form is within the first few months of them working with us, they'll meet with a mentor, which is one of the managers in our Operation and User Services department. And this meeting is a mentorship meeting. So they're talking about the questions that they had, the answers that they had responded to, and the manager will offer them suggestions or help them with different resources that they might be able to provide them. And then they'll meet both semesters. They'll meet the fall semester and the winter semester to make sure that everything is going well, see if there's anything else that they might need help. And I don't know if I think I talked about everything.
The third component of the program is we always offer a workshop in the spring called Where Do You Go From Here? And the workshop is basically the purpose of the workshop is for students to really get experience talking about what they learned as UX students. We do some practice interview questions. They look through different real job postings and think about how the required qualifications align with what they learned as UX students. And then they practice like articulating their experience in a resume and a cover letter. So that's the third component.
Yeah, and as someone that's gone through the program, just some like specific things I saw get reflected in my work here from what I wrote in the assessment was this was back when I met with Erin Fisher, who no longer works with us at the library, but she worked on a lot of creative projects while she was here, and with my two majors being dance and nonprofit work, she knows that in the future I plan on going on more creative ventures in the nonprofit work that I'll be doing. And so after we had our meeting, she would always come to me when she was working on these projects, asking for my input on them, asking if I could assist her with some of the work, which I really appreciated because it gave me those experiences then. And also, not my own personal story, but I know through this process, one of my peers here, she actually changed her major because of these meetings and is much more happy in her current major and the future that she's having. So this program is very, very impactful for us as students.
And we have done, so after we launched the program, for 2 years, I think we did a survey of our students, both after the first year and the second year, but 100% of our students who responded said that we should continue the program. And I can't remember the exact percent, but a very high percentage of them strongly agreed that it contributed to their learning. So it's one of the things I'm really proud of in our work with our student colleagues.
Good question, Denise.
So we'll stay logged on to see if there are any last questions here, but we also wanted to make sure that you saw some of our references today. And if you're interested in learning more about GVSU's service model or any of the other things that we referenced today, those are on the screen for you now.
And then just chiming back in here, so thank you so much all for attending, and thank you to all of our great speakers. It was a really great presentation. So the next upcoming MiALA webinar is on March 25th, Wednesday, March 25th from 1 to 2, and that'll be about Google Data Studio. So yeah, we have a couple more time. We have a little bit more time for questions if anyone has a last one they want to turn their mic on for or put in the chat.
Thank you, Scooter.
Scooter also liked our speaker
Oh,
name
thank
in the
you.
corner. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you to a fellow Catherine.
Denise and Heather, it looks like we probably don't have any further questions. So we wanted to thank everyone so much for participating. And of course, you can feel free to contact us at Grand Valley if you have any follow-up questions on anything we talked about today. And I just wanted to thank MiALA and the interest group for inviting us to talk today.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you.